Yep. All right. I call to order the Gladstone City Council meeting for September 11th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. Hello, everybody, and thank you for spending your lovely rainy Tuesday evening with us. I normally start the meetings with some quirky holiday, but today's different. It's 9/11 Remembrance Day. It's a day to reflect how significantly our lives have all changed because of that one event, and to honor those first responders and citizens that died in such a horrific way. It's my day to remember my friend Richard Guadagno, who was manager of the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge. He flew back east for his grandmother's 100th birthday and never came back. So instead of saying happy anything, I would like to say, please remember what's important in your life, hold those that you love close, and never focus on the petty hatreds and differences that got us where we are today. So, could you please call the roll?
Councilor Milch.
Here.
Councilor Neese.
Present.
Councilor Tracy.
Present.
Councilor Reisner.
Here.
Councilor McMahon.
Here.
Councilor Mercero.
Here.
Mayor Stemple.
Here, could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So tonight's agenda, we'll have the following presentations. We've got a Rivers East Village, which is helping neighbors age in place. We're also going to talk about certified local government designation. Our consent agenda includes approval of the August 14th, 2018 regular meeting minutes, approval of the July bank balances, budget report for period ending July 31st, 2018, approval of the July check register, legal costs on projects, Department Head Monthly Reports for August 2018, Resolution 1146, which is a resolution approving Clackamas County Tobacco Retail Licensing. Our regular meeting agenda would be Resolution 1145, adopting the process and an evaluation document for the evaluation of the City Administrator's job performance, permanent surface water storm drain and sanitary sewer easement to Water Environmental Services, also called WES, for the 82nd Street project, Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force, the appointment of a Gladstone representative, Amendment 3 to the Cooperative Intergovernmental Agreement, which is also referred to as an IGA, between the Library District of Clackamas County and Library Cities, Gladstone Library Community Planning Task Force formation process, and we're going to add the review and discussion of access to legal bills. Do we have any agenda additions or corrections?
Thank you, Mayor. You have before you tonight an additional correspondence for agenda item number 9 on your dais. And you also have an item under correspondence in regards to a temporary dwelling permit. And if possible, when we get to that item, I'd like to be able for the council to make a decision this evening.
All right. Let's see, did we need to add anything else? Correspondence. All right. So before we start, I would like to say a few words regarding the City Council. I think the first most important limitation is that as we sit here, we are representing the citizens of Gladstone, not our own personal agendas and beliefs. There have been so many times when a decision being made doesn't align with what we would like personally, but have made a decision based on what is best for the city as a whole. That doesn't mean our personal beliefs have changed, just that the city's needs were more important. As we discuss and consider matters, there are laws and rules we have to use as the basis of our decision. These start at the federal and state level, then filter down to our city's comp plan, city charter, codes, and ordinances. We do not have the luxury of randomly making decisions, but instead have to be consistent and take a path that is defensible. I want you all to know we appreciate you taking the time to come here and participate in this process. The council will hold comment until the end of the meeting, where we have a placeholder to discuss any action from council to staff related to business from the audience. I would like all of you to respect the desire of others to hear what we are talking about, so if you could keep your side discussions to a minimum and as quietly as possible, I'd appreciate it. Also, I would like to ask all of us to make sure our phones are turned off. My goal is to keep this meeting respectful and engaging. I hope you can all help us do that. Thank you. So, business from the audience.
Bill Osborne.
Hi, Bill Osborne. I live here in Gladstone. A few things. One, we have a solve cleanup coming, our last scheduled one for the year. It's going to be Saturday, September 29th from 10 until noon. So we're looking for volunteers for that. We had quite a big turnout in the last one. We got a decent amount of garbage picked up, and High Rocks continues to look better than what it did before we started these cleanups. So I'm hoping we're making a difference on that. We actually had some of the homeless campers come up this time, ask for some garbage bags. I gave them a few. They brought them back full of garbage.
Wow.
I was surprised. Gave them some more bags, so hopefully they'll start cleaning up after themselves. Another thing we have coming up on the ballot measure is the levies. Now I know on the police levy before it had been talked about dealer transaction fees. We have a lot of car lots here. And when somebody's spending $35,000 to $50,000 on a new car, I think $100 or $150 fee to help local law enforcement out isn't a big drop in the bucket. I've been talking to some of the car lots, trying to start that conversation. I'm going to continue doing so, but you guys ultimately would be the ones that have to look into that for anything official. Just like you to keep that in mind. You know me, I always look at creative ways to approach things, and that's a creative way to help us with some funding and lower our property taxes at the same time and help the police department out to provide the same services. Another thing we have going on is the Gladstone Food Pantry. They're still looking for some sponsorship to pay for the coordinator position. I know we have the transient lodging tax, which nobody has quite figured out what we're going to do with yet. I know we're going to address that next year. My understanding is 30% of that needs to go to tourism. The food pantry helps out people not just here in Gladstone. It also helps people from other surrounding areas. So, in effect, even though they're low-income people, it is a tourist destination by definition. We also have the business license fees and such, which I understand haven't been spent on a lot. Not that I expect these people are coming in and spending a lot of money in the community, but they may stop for a cup of coffee or a shaved ice. So maybe you guys might look at creative ways to help fund that so we can keep that open and keep that going. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Kathleen Hollingsworth.
Good evening. You've never seen me here before. I've never come to one of these meetings. My name's Kathleen. I teach at Clackamas Community College. I'm also the music director at St. Stephen Lutheran. I came here to just open up a discussion on two things. First, I have a concern about this mistake with the water department. I think it should be very open and clear what that mistake is about, and I think it should be made public knowledge. All it says on that piece of paper is, oh, we've made a mistake, sorry, you guys owe us a bunch of money. And I wrote the water about it and got back and said, sorry, we made a mistake. All I know is when I don't register my vehicle and I get stopped, I still get a DE tag and I'm still responsible. If my insurance lapses and that's my mistake, I'm still responsible. So I just want to kind of put it out there that I think it should be public knowledge what's going on very clearly with that mistake from the water department. My next item of business is we met a couple weeks ago because I was really happy to see a cleanup going on at High Rocks. High Rocks is a gem. It's my backyard. I live very close to there. It is an awesome space, but it is full of trash. And it is despicable how people mistreat that area. And so I'm glad that there's a new dumpster there to try to help mitigate that, but I'd like to propose a wiser and a more enlightened way to go forward with this. The Leave No Trace movement is been growing in popularity, and more people are knowing about this Leave No Trace movement, which means leave this place better than when you showed up. And I believe that with a couple $1,000s through making some signs at every entrance of High Rocks, to not only leave no trace, but to pack it in and pack it out, we can enlighten people that come and visit this awesome, really beautiful resource, and to ask people to not just throw things away, but pack it in, pack it out, leave no trace, and then instead of a dumpster, that we have 3 recycling bins, some for glass, aluminum, and then a trash. I think that is the way we need to move forward. I really don't like going down there and seeing trash all over the place. We need to enlighten people, ask them to step up their game, instead of just, asking community members to go in and pick up other people's trash. We ask them to pack it out, and we can research the Leave No Trace movement. I'd be happy to chair a committee to make that happen so that next spring, every entrance to High Rocks is asking people to step up their game. This is a great town. I love living here. I pay taxes here. I think it's a beautiful spot, and I think we need to treat it better.
And everybody heard her volunteer, right? Everybody
I
here,
will.
it's on the record.
I'd be glad to chair a small committee to make this happen for next spring. So next summer, people are like, oh, maybe I shouldn't leave my trash around.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Bob Everett.
Good evening, Bob Everett, Gladstone, Business and Home. Good evening, councilors, Mayor, Jackie. I have a couple items tonight, so I'll try not to be too long-winded. The first one is the Gladstone Senior Foundation, of which I am a member. Colette is also here, who's also a member on the foundation. I just thought I'd give sort of an update as to what the foundation's been doing, and sort of some of the things that we do support. A lot of people don't really know a lot about the Senior Foundation, and therefore, the more knowledge we feel that we can give out, the better that people will sort of understand. We do, couple of the things that we have done and we are doing is we do provide funding for a number of the events that happen at the Senior Center, 50th anniversary, Thanksgiving, Christmas, other sort of events. We just budgeted money for that this year so that they can have actually a catered meal, some prizes, things like that. We've provided quite a bit of funding for the I'm going to call it sort of the food growing area, because they're setting that up there sort of in the front. They're going to have some planter boxes, and that will be taken care of by the seniors, and we'll provide food for the seniors at the center, and we help fund a fair bit of that. We also sponsored the pancake breakfast, the senior pancake breakfast during the festival, and lately we had a very nice conversation with Jackie and Jim from the city to sort of discuss both the city and the foundation working together in conjunction for the betterment, really, of the center. Out of the conversation, the foundation agreed to cover the cost of the HVAC unit, which has already been placed up there, brand new one on one area, and that was funded through the Plantin Estate. The Plantin Estate was set up many, many years ago as a way to help with some capital improvements of the center, and we are hopeful that we can continue the sort of that relationship, because it was very positive, far more than it was before, and we can help provide any support. Also, the foundation's always looking for new for funding. All the donations are tax deductible, and so that will end my foundation. The second thing, and I'm sorry I'm taking two, is the festival. I bought Bryce here tonight. If he could come up or at least grab. I met Bryce a few months ago. Well, I didn't really meet him. I just talked to him back in December. And Bryce is a local artist, and I asked him to come to the festival, to be part of the festival, to basically just to be part of it. And he set up a booth. He and Jeremy, his partner, set up a booth. And Jeremy was a lifesaver. He really was, because he's a physician, and we believe it was very necessary. And we're going to move them to a more central location. But one of the things we talked about was just providing entertainment, some things for the kids. And he set up a painting center there. One of the things he did was to set up a mural. He asked a mural that citizens of Gladstone could come over and paint. And I have a little tooth over there. Jal Duncan put a camera, and we're hoping to do this every single year and sort of provide this. Now, my other hope is that maybe the city can see some way that we can maybe have a rotating sort of art situation either at City Hall or the library or something like that, and we can put these up. I mean, obviously we hope to get quite a collection, but they don't have to all go up. But if we could rotate them a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out where to put that. But anyway, it's in my office and people commented on it all the time. But I just thought I thought that would be great, sort of you might might enjoy seeing that then too. So anyway, thanks so much.
Well, thank you very, very much. All right, next.
Don't
Mindy
put it
Garlington.
Don't put it in the elevator.
Mindy Garlington, Gladstone. I'm just going to read this because it's just the easiest way to go. The call to volunteer for our various boards will soon be announced, and shortly after, applications will be accepted. I wanted to make sure that there was enough notification to allow residents the time to really think about where they can help. Everyone can help somewhere, although not all are able to. If you're able and I want to encourage your participation, you can make a difference. Your time will be put to good use, and you will have the opportunity to meet many people in our awesome community. I would encourage the council to expand the library board to 7 members. I believe at this time it would be most helpful to have more rather than less. Not all boards have open spaces, but here's a list of spots that are open and or will be by the end of the year. The audit committee needs a person, the budget committee needs 3 people, the library is 2, parks is 1, planning is 1, the senior center is 2, and traffic is 2. After doing the volunteer work that I do, I appreciate the time that people put in. It takes a lot. It takes homework. It takes your time. I get it. I really do. And these boards are really important for people to spend their time and give their input to make your job an easier thing to do. So that's all. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Drew.
Next.
Last is Angela Riley.
Hello. So, in 2016, a group called Voting for Stronger Gladstone ran for office together. They were Tammy Stemple, Neil Reisner, Bill Osborne, and Frank Hernandez, endorsed by Mindy Garlington. I believe it's no coincidence that each of these people are either in office now or running for office. I believe this group has been seeking to create a majority in Gladstone city government for a long time. It's also believed among Gladstone citizens that it was Mayor Stemple's use of her advisory committee instead of following our city charter to fill 2 seats as a blatant attempt to put her ally, Frank Hernandez, in council after he'd lost the election. Calling Frank the night before to tell him he was chosen by the committee was a flagrant disregard to integrity, professionalism, and due process. The angry response because he wasn't voted was only because it was supposed to have been a done deal. This town has been feeling the backlash of that event ever since, and we're tired of the accusations and attacks coming from this group. The ugly methods of achieving goals has become like a cancer in Gladstone. Using the media as a tool, we all get dragged through the mud each time Neil, Tammy, Bill, or Frank goes running to the Clackamas Review with a new accusation. Mr. Hernandez's threat to sue the city of Gladstone is on public record. I encourage everyone to watch past videos of council meetings and hear the tirades, and him threatening the same city government that he wants to represent. At last month's meeting, he denied doing this, worried someone else impugned his reputation, but we can all view him doing it to himself. Each time Bill Osborne attacks another person, we're reminded of who is truly the problem and who is helping him. Each time someone is attacked, that person is left trying to respond and recover. This is not the way to treat each other. Imagine if all the drama disappeared and we could simply focus on the business of Gladstone. I bring this up because we're about to have an election season and Gladstone needs change. We need positive people, a professional mayor and council working as a team instead of tearing each other apart. It can happen if we stop throwing others under the bus and move forward. When voting, our family will be choosing those with integrity who put our town first above personal agendas and who use professional and respectable methods for achieving goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the last one?
That was the last one, correct.
All right. So the first item is our consent agenda. Any discussion?
Seeing none, Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda, items 1 through 7.
I'll accept it. Okay, who's seconding it?
Both of us.
Councilor Neese can have a second.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon, seconded by Councilor Neese. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passed. Next item is correspondence.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So I sent this to you earlier, and following process, it is a policy decision, but essentially what you have is you have an individual that has asked for a temporary permit to store their RV, and that time has expired, and we had allowed them 2 weeks to do that. So you have a copy of the letter. It's in the Gladstone Municipal Code, section 1528020. And you have the extension letter by Cora Van Meter and Ken Bretchel. They are here this evening if you would like to speak with them. I'm happy to let you know that they have found a place, and so I have no issue with extending this another 10 days to allow them to get to a permanent location.
Any discussion? I have a quick, so temporary dwellings, are these complaint driven, or is this something that Sean is actively going around town looking for?
No, it's just that they came to the city and followed the process to
Wonderful.
get the temporary correct.
Okay,
But
thank
if we do receive a complaint, then yes, Sean will go out and actively enforce that.
Okay, so you need,
I need the council to agree to a 10-day extension.
okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we...
Oh,
Just
Councilor Michael.
clarification, do you mean 10 days from the 7th or 10 days from today?
I would say 10 days from today.
Okay. Go ahead.
I make a motion that we accept from today for 10 days and give them the extension that they need.
I second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Neese, seconded by Councilor Mercero. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you. So the next item is presentation, Rivers East Village, Helping Neighbors Age in Place.
Okay, and I believe Colette and Kay are going to do a presentation for you.
Yes. Wonderful. Do we have a PowerPoint or anything? What kind of presentation?
I like that.
I'm retired.
Fine. Sweet and simple.
Okay, I'm Colette Umbrus, and I am here tonight with Kay Weaver. We're here to talk about Rivers East Village, and it's a new concept, fairly new concept for Oregon, although they've had this in the East for quite some time. And I've already talked to Tammy about it, and I think Michael, I'm sorry, also knows about it a little bit. But what we're hoping to do is just inform you of what we're up to and hope to get your support in the future for our endeavors of helping neighbors stay neighbors as long as possible. And I brought Kay. She's the chair of our group, and she's been a driving force in this, and she will explain to you a little bit more about what villages are and who we're working with on this and how we hope to go forward. I'll let Kay jump in. Thank you.
Do we have do we have those brochures? Maybe you want to look at that?
I'm going to give those to you after.
Okay.
So that we have your attention now.
Have our attention.
Thank you, Colette, and thank you, Mayor and council people, for
inviting us to be here. I'm a Jennings Lodge resident, and of course you know that Colette is a Gladstone resident, whom you know from the library effort, from the Senior Foundation, and other community efforts. We represent a group of local residents who are forming a non-profit community that we call Rivers East Village. The intent of the village is to enable individuals to remain in their homes as long as possible, as comfortably and safely as possible, as affordably as possible, for as long as possible. Most people who love their own homes in their neighborhoods prefer to stay there as they age, and we believe many would stay in their homes longer if they only had a little help. We also know that their neighbors, that's you and I and these who are attending tonight, would be willing to help if we only knew what some of the tasks might be that our neighbors are needing. Rivers East Village wants to connect the people who need help with those who are willing to do the help. In other words, we want to help our neighbors stay our neighbors and not have to move to retirement communities and to other smaller venues where they haven't lived most of their lives. As you probably know, there's a big need. AARP survey said 89% of seniors want to remain in their homes. Boomer expectations in retirement from a Google search say 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. 35% of those list Social Security as their major retirement fund. 35%. Availability and affordability of alternative housing is limited. As you know, they're being built everywhere, but we also know that they're very expensive. And assisted livings, retirement communities, and more will not be enough for the 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring every day. As Colette said, this is not a new model. It began in Boston in 2001, and in a very well-to-do neighborhood that had a big snowstorm. And the people there began to realize, as a result of the snowstorm, that they needed each other. And they formed the first village, which was an attempt to stay where they lived and get the help that they needed. By 2016, there were 300 villages in the U.S., and there are 185 in process. There are 8 villages in the Portland area, but none in the Milwaukee-Gladstone area, which is why we've come together to try to make this possible in this our own community. The kinds of tasks we envision helping people with are shopping, errands, light housekeeping, minor home repairs, technology support, transportation to doctors and other appointments. And a village can also help alleviate some of the isolation that comes, especially with reduced mobility because people can no longer drive. Let me tell you about a neighbor of mine who called me one day and said that she needed an electrician. So I said, well, Maureen, I'll call my son, who is a contractor, and see if he knows of someone. So he said, Mom, every electrician I know is booked 6 weeks in advance. I couldn't possibly get someone down there soon. So I go down to tell Maureen that I haven't been successful in finding an electrician for her, and ask what it is she needs. And it turns out that there's a light over the kitchen sink, and it's up near the ceiling level, and the light bulb has been twisted off in the socket, and she needs an electrician. Well, of course, I went up the street and found the young man who's pretty agile and willing to be helpful, and he came down and stood on the counter and fixed the light fixture. Now, what Village East is trying to do is to put people like the neighbor up the street and Maureen, who needed help and was not an electrician, together, but on a bigger scale. So Portland has an organization that they call a hub that is assisting these 9, now we are the 9th, villages to get started, and it supports them with a quality business model, insurance coverage, training for volunteers and drivers, background checks, and 501(c)(3) nonprofit status, so that we don't have to do all of that work and can get to serving people's needs more quickly. So you wonder, what does it cost? Subscribers who want full services, which would be the equivalent of 3 trips, driver-assisted trips in a week, would pay about $45 a month. That would be for full services. There would be people who want to be only social members, which would be about half of that price. And there would be scholarships for low-income people based on the kind of grant applications and contributions that we'd be able to secure in the future. The volunteers who help with this are not subscribers. They are baby boomers, some of them like Colette, who willing to help people with their needs. We would have people that help with gardening, etc. And the hub in Portland has a computer system that matches people who say they would volunteer to help with various tasks, so that when a call comes in and someone needs help for a trip to the doctor, say, there would be people who are trained to be drivers, and the computer system would put the notice out to them, and if one of them was available for that date, they would accept, and the others are off the hook. It works very well for people who have recently retired, because if you want to volunteer in a place like I did for several years with Father's Heart in Oregon City, I had to be there every Friday morning. Now, Friday mornings were sometimes kind of hard to commit, especially it meant that I never got extended weekends to go with my family or whatever, or if I wanted to go out of town, then they were short-handed. This way someone can volunteer for a task on the times that they're available, and other times when they are committed, they're not on the list. So what can you do for us? We're finding it really difficult to get an outreach in the Gladstone area. We had a workshop that we held at St. Stephen's Church, and we did some door-to-door flyers, and we were all excited about it, and we had our volunteer group there, and 4 people came. So trying to find a way to reach the people with the information is something that I hope you can advise us about and assist with. We add people to our database so that when we're ready to provide services, and we aren't ready yet, we may not even be ready for a full year, although we're hoping sooner, that we'd be able to contact both people who want to volunteer and those who would like to have services. So we have information in the flyer that tells you how to reach us. We have a website, we have Facebook, we have information you probably see in the Clackamas Review, and we need your help to get the word out. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
What's Facebook?
What's Facebook?
Yes, ma'am.
Computer system that some people have.
So what are you, did you put something in our newsletter? Are you using Clackamas Review? How are you getting the word out now?
We put something in the Clackamas Review. We had an article you might even have seen several months ago. We had an article and a photograph to tell that we were starting this. Since then, we have aligned with the hub in Portland, and we are in much better position to represent the community as a whole. And we're trying to keep it within the local community.
Okay, so it's not going to be a Milwaukee Gladstone combined, or it will be? Okay, it will be.
Yeah.
And we call ourselves Rivers East because we have outlined a territory within which we'd like to work. And that is from the Clackamas River north to the Multnomah County line, which is just about Johnson Creek Boulevard.
Okay.
From the Willamette River east to 205.
Okay, so that's a big
Big
chunk.
area.
Okay.
Something like this, it takes a good-sized area to maintain,
Okay.
because you always need people coming in and donations, and yeah, people willing to volunteer too. And so you take Gladstone alone, we looked into that, and it just wasn't a large enough community.
Okay.
But with Milwaukee and in the unincorporated area too, I think altogether we could create a really vibrant organization that will continue in the future, even without the people like us. Just an example of another service that can be provided. I have a friend whose husband is in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and one of the things she's asked me, she said she's managing so far, but one of the things that would be a big help to her is for someone to take him somewhere for a couple, 3 hours.
Yeah.
So she can have the house to herself and do things around the house, because it's very difficult with him there. Just those kinds of little things.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you ask family and you ask neighbors, but then you feel like you're imposing after a while. And so this would be a way of them, you know, gaining a little bit more maybe independence and not feeling beholden, so to speak. I'm also hoping that I'll be able to get a notice in our city newsletter.
Yeah, I
And
think that would be a good
I did
way.
want to ask the council if that would be okay. I
Yeah.
think that would be a good way of reaching our citizens in Gladstone, because I am having a hard time getting a foothold in this community, and I know there's a huge need here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, is it something we could put in the newsletter? No problem.
Yeah, we can send Colette deadlines for that information and have that available, yes.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I'd like to honor you for you trying to do what you're doing. You mentioned one word that struck me, is isolation. And seniors, when they're getting younger, often get locked up in their homes and stare at the wall. And I think your assistance and what you're suggesting is something more than just doing things. It's helping them communicate and able to communicate. So I support your effort 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some
Appreciate
of
it.
what we do, what we hope to do, and we are beginning now, is to hold some social events, to meet for coffee, to plan a walk, to all read the same article and get together and discuss it, to do things that pull people together who might not otherwise. And the senior center, the Milwaukee, I guess it's not called the senior center.
Community center.
Community center. The senior center here in Gladstone have been supportive to help us with that too. And I realize that there are lots of services offered in the county, but most of those are for low-income people. We are looking at people who are not necessarily low income, but still not able to move to Mary's Woods.
Yeah. Or who don't want to. Maybe they can afford to, but they don't want to. But they may not have the family, and they may not have the social, network to be able to, as Tom says, not just sit in their house all day, all by themselves. So.
You mentioned that you're number 9, so are there other facilities outside of our area of Milwaukee, Gladstone?
Yes.
Okay.
There's one in Beaverton. The first one, there's one that's called North Star, which is the Alameda area.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that's called East Side, which is within the Portland city limits, but north of Johnson Creek Boulevard and east. There's one called Willow, which is Lake Oswego, West Lynn. Then there's a group in Oregon City that's trying to get one started. They visited with us for quite a bit, and now they are starting what we did last March.
And just to be clear, this, a lot of people get confused because of the term village, and a lot of people think that is a facility. No, it's not a facility. It's the village-to-village concept, and people helping other people and people helping neighbors. Couldn't think of a better word, but it is not a facility. It's not like a retirement community or a brick and mortar thing. It's just people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I have a comment to make. On the way here, there was on NPR, there was a woman speaking of her experience in a hurricane in Houston, and about just meeting her neighbors and understanding after they'd met because of a disaster, they finally realized that forming the bonds of a neighborhood was essential for all of them to survive and to actually make it through that. And I think, as you're speaking on this topic, I think the one thing that strikes me is our senior population who become isolated, but also in the event of something like that, and we are all in resiliency planning here in the region, those folks kind of batten down the hatches and don't necessarily reach out. And I think this is an excellent way for us as a community to be able to track who is out there, so that, in the event of a disaster, we have the ability to be able to reach out to these folks and bring them into safety. Because I have an older uncle, great uncle of mine, who at 92, during the extreme storm events, basically just shuttered his house, and you didn't see him for 5 days, and nobody knew whether he was there or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's obviously their reaction to the situation. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to be able to work with you and our community emergency resource teams and response teams, and being able to identify who's where.
Mm-hmm.
And through this group, for instance, we'd be able to know where folks are and be able to go out and render that aid and assistance. I think this is a great thing, and I'm totally in support of it. So I'm hoping that we can put together something to support you folks.
Yeah, I see where we could be another tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the emergency folks to use.
It's a true value to the community.
Yeah, thank you. We hope so.
Yeah.
Anything else?
We hope so. If you have any questions, we do have a website, and you can call me. I know all of you, except Matt, and I'll get to know him, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, you will.
Anyway, you could give me a call, and spread the word, I guess, is what I'm saying, is if you know anybody in that situation who might either want to volunteer with us or want to be a recipient of some of the services we might be able to provide, give them my name or our name, or
We have a phone number, an email. We've tried different ways that people can reach us depending on what's the best channel for them.
Yeah, this brochure is the general brochure that's put out by the large Oregon Village Northwest organization. This insert is just about us. So the information here is ours.
Wonderful. Good. So connect with staff, and we'll make sure that we get something in the newsletter.
Thank you very much for your time.
And come back and keep us updated on where you guys are and what other help you may need,
Okay,
for sure.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm going to leave these at the back for anybody here who might like to take one.
Alrighty. So the next item is a presentation on certified local government designation. It's not really a presentation, it's more of a discussion, and I believe council's had this discussion a couple of years ago. So the National Park Service has a program called Certified Local Government. And what it is a program to preserve our historic properties, which would be buildings, structures, sites, neighborhoods, and other places that are important, by offering financial and technical assistance. The local government participates directly in this program with the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office, which certifies the local governments that have established their own Historic Preservation Commission. So I have a couple people here that are with the Historical Society. If you guys want to kind of raise your hand. Is that it? I thought we had one more person in here. Where is she? She left. Okay. So the reason that I brought this up is because, number one, we have our Portland Avenue revitalization plan in place, and when there was a study done, or a pseudo-survey done, when we first looked at the Portland Avenue revitalization plan, which was, I think, 12 years ago now. And they did a survey and discovered that we have a lot of resources in our core here that are potentially eligible for historic designation. So if we are going to look at our revitalization, that's something that we need to look at as well. How that would benefit us. Could we preserve it for recognition? Could we preserve it to create a sense of place that's unique to Gladstone? What can we do? The other piece of that is that the State of Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, which created statewide planning goals back in 1982, put in Planning Goal 5, which specifically includes historic resource preservation. So this isn't just something that we should do, it's something that we are required to do. We don't have anything in place right now. So why become a certified local government? Number one, it's required to preserve our historic and cultural resources. It provides funding, it provides technical assistance, sustainability. They've done so many surveys that show that when you have a robust historic preservation program, property values increase. What you have to do to be a certified local government is that you have to create a commission that reviews properties that could potentially be historic. You can make that as complex as you want. There's some cities that only vote or determine the kind of lighting that you have on your house or what color you paint it. It could be super complex, like the city of Portland, where they specify what kind of windows you have, what kind of lap siding, what kind of roofing. It's up to us. We write our own rules. What you have to do is maintain a historic preservation commission. You have to do a local historic property survey. You have to enforce the state and local preservation laws, which are laws, provide for public participation, and then other functions that are delegated or required by the state. So you all don't have this, but the council has in their packet some information on a couple properties that are right here in our core that either are eligible and contributing, eligible and significant, or are already designated historic. And they also have an overview of the Portland Avenue core going out a couple blocks, showing just how many properties we have that could be eligible, as well as Addie Street. There's a lot there, and they call it the Interurban Railroad District. What the people whose houses or buildings have been designated as potentially eligible aren't required to participate. They can opt out. So it's only the people that want their structures registered and recognized. So that's what I have so far, and I'm sure that you guys have questions. Basically, what I would like is for us to become a certified local government. Oh, yeah, grant money. So right off the bat, the National Park Service has funds available on a every other year basis, And each participating certified local government gets an allotted amount, and I think our allotted amount would be $10,000 to $11,000 in that range, and we can use that however we want. There's also lots of other technical resource grants available. Jackie sent us an email about a lottery program that offers funds for historic resource preservation. They're very active in the Main Street program, so there's a lot of times where a certified local government kind of meshes with the Main Street program. So there's a lot of stuff that's available, and I would hate to lose our sense of place by not really recognizing what we have. And only being a part of the Historical Society for, 4 months now? 5 months? Not very long. I am amazed at how significant our area is. Not just in historic buildings, but in culture. It is amazing. I've been talking with the Grand Ron tribe. I'm blown away with how much we have here in our little town. I hate to mow it over, demolish it, and get rid of something that's significant and important for us. Questions?
Mayor, what generally determines whether a building would qualify? Is it the year that it's built, or whether it's substantially in the same condition that it was when it was built?
They have a rolling time period where it's about 45 years. It goes back about 45 years, and anything that old is considered potentially eligible. And then they layer on what's the architecture, what's the history of it, where is it located. So there's a lot of things that layer on top of that. So the maps that you have here are potentially based on age, but some of them, when I was doing some research, also brought in the architecture and the use. So it's, I hate to say that there's a lot of single-story row houses that are now considered potentially eligible, but they get kind of washed out when they do a full survey.
If you want to know more about it, I went back to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, a couple years ago.
The Main Street conference.
Main Street, and Main Street is the driver of this program. And there's lots of things you need to do, but it's a neat program, and a lot of cities are involved. So, but Main Street, I think, is the key word phrase that you'll learn a lot from.
I think the Main Street is under the certified local government, but yeah, it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
Right now in Oregon we have 51 counties and cities that are certified local governments. And it gives us a little bit more control, I think, over what we want to preserve, where right now we have no control at all. Clackamas County is a certified local government. I believe that anything that goes on in Gladstone also gets sent to them, even though we're not considered one. They just kind of do a quick look, just in case there's something really significant that we're planning on changing. But we should be our own so that we can control what's significant or not.
The certified homes, I believe, need to in fact be certified to be redone almost with the same materials that they were originally purchased.
That would be for the National Historic Registry,
Yeah.
which that's not this. This is more of a local level, and we would determine what we felt was a requirement. Yeah, if you want to be on the National Historic Registry, that's a whole nother level of, I think, crazy, but it's very prescriptive.
It'd be neat if we got there, but...
We have a couple, actually, in town that would qualify for that. And this would highlight those. That would bring it out and give them the steps if they chose to do that. Yes.
Mayor, I have a question. So with this certified local government, I think you spoke to the option, the opt-out option,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
I too believe that, we should preserve, what's historically relevant, definitely to the city. I know that, citizens can get a little, skittish about these types of projects because it seems like it may impede what they want to do with their own properties. I own a property in the McLaughlin Historic District, and quite frankly, I found it to be easy to be able to work with the city. So my question to you is that how would you, if we were to go forward with this, how would we structure this, and then in what way does this, how is this governed? How do you structure it? Do you structure it by committee?
Yes.
Is it then committee to the council so that
Yes.
there's, okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I was looking for, is the lineage going back to the authority of the city.
I kind of see this as a subset of Planning Commission, actually,
Okay.
where they would report back to Planning Commission if there was any, I don't know, any project that they were working on. Other cities, the way they're set up is that there's what seemed to be the most popular was 2 Planning Commission members, a city councilor, the people that have real robust historical societies had a couple members, and there was a couple citizens, but ones that specifically had a background in architecture, historic preservation, something that was relevant to historic preservation, and then a tribal consultant.
Okay.
And for us, the tribal entity that's very prominent here is the Grand Ronde, which actually isn't just one tribe, it's like 20-some tribes that are confederated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're really, really wonderful to work with. So it's something that we should think about, and I would not recommend following Portland's historical preservation outline because that's crazy prescriptive.
It is prescriptive.
Crazy prescriptive. Start something simple, and that's what the SHPO office, the State Historic Preservation Office, could help us with. They would provide the technical assistance to help us create our program that is what we want.
Okay.
But again, like I said, this is something that's required by the state planning goals. So there is a piece of this that's necessary.
But in their requirement, what's the prescription there? They require that we have it in place so that
Yes.
we're at least making the review and we're
Yep.
allowing folks to opt in to constructive and detailed planning of the...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Historical Society, have any comments on that?
Sure we all support formation of this. I think it's beneficial to our city. It would also help us in moving forward in preserving some things. It's by many of the old buildings are torn down and falling apart and aren't here. So.
Right, and this gives us an opportunity to leverage some funding to help people maybe do some preservation that they want. There's a couple commercial buildings on Portland Avenue that are considered historical that we might be able to help out.
The funding for facade,
Right, facade improvements.
restoration.
Mhm.
I think that would look nice on Portland Avenue, buildings, fixed up how they originally were built. But nice. Now,
So what was
opens up the doors will also help to motivate people to want to become part of it.
our little gas station across the street is actually eligible and significant, so that's a plus.
Yeah,
So he
I
could've
would
got
agree. I
some
don't want
money.
to see the gas station go away. I am noticing, though, in the packet we have
Yeah.
the building on Portland Avenue, which is now presently undergoing a remodel.
And she could have,
Right.
yeah, we could have qualified to get some funding for that. Now, Linda Cosgrove has a huge binder of all of the home, pretty much.
From 1981, Clackamas County did a survey in 1981, and I went up to the Oregon City Historical Society. They had 2 copies. They just gave me one, and much of it, I have copies of Gladstone, and I will give that to you at Thursday night meetings. I meant to bring it tonight. I walked out without it.
It's pretty cool.
It is. It's pretty remarkable, and it's sad that some of these buildings are gone.
Yeah.
Some of them were beautiful, and they're just gone. And once they're gone, it's permanent.
Yeah, and I want to stress, it's not just the historic buildings, but it's also our historic places, so it's broader than just the built environment. So do you guys want to think about it? Do you want me to bring it back at another meeting? Do we want to make a decision tonight that we would like to at least look at this and pursue moving forward? I just want to make sure we're ahead of it, because we know the development curve is going to be hitting us hard, because we're like the lone standout in this region. I just want to make sure that we're prepared for that, and that the development's thoughtful and it's on our terms.
I think we've already approved the funding of a consultant that's going to help us with some of the work related to the downtown area, kind of as a follow-up to the study we did last year. And I think to whatever extent this sort of dovetails with that, we ought to pass along information to make sure that we're, you know, kind of moving everything in the same direction and consistent, and not, you know, having to reinvent the wheel or not running into conflicts by having things that, you know, have different goals. But it seems to be a similar enough goal, what we're looking at with that consultant, that it'd be something good to pass along.
Okay,
Correct. So Mr. Southgate and I met yesterday to talk about the next steps of the downtown revitalization plan, and one of them is whether or not we move forward with a Main Street program or implementing and applying to become this local certified district. So I look for him to bring a report back to you at the 1st of November with those talking points, and we
Perfect.
will incorporate this into that, yes.
Perfect. All right. Any more discussion? All right, we're good. Thank you very much. All right. Next item, we're moving on to our regular agenda, Resolution 1145, adopting the process and an evaluation document containing criteria for the evaluation of the city administrator's job performance.
Good morning,
Yes.
or good evening, Mayor and members of the council. It's been a long day. I am Nancy McDonald. I'm the interim Human Resources Director for the city. I met most of you some months back. The agenda item that I have before you tonight is the adoption of a process and an evaluation document containing the criteria for the evaluation of the city administrator's job performance. I'm very happy that on my first opportunity to present to you, it's an issue that I consider one of the bedrocks of human resource management, and that's employee performance evaluation. When I did the research for tonight's presentation, I discovered that in January of this year, when you adopted your new council rules, you had a section in there regarding the city administrator evaluation. And while it outlined somewhat of a process, it didn't address any criteria to be used in the evaluation. So what you will find in the staff report is a document that I have made as simple to use as possible, and it's based on many years spent in human resources working in a variety of organizations, and I've gleaned the most important areas to be reflected in this document. I would hope that you would find this easy to use. It can be done in either manual or electronic format, whichever you prefer. And then I also made a recommendation to you that we differ from the council rules that you adopted in January. And if you reflect back on that document, it will show that based on a city administrator's current contract, timelines are affected. And we are faced with Ms. Betts' one-year anniversary as your city administrator coming up next month. So I have developed a timeline that would fit within that schedule. Good. And then two other things that I'd like to point out is the initiator of this process was to be the city recorder, and you now have a new city recorder who is very, very busy with elections and levies. And then you had the actual processing of the documentation performed by the city attorney, and I know that we are trying to minimize the amount of time that we are spending using the city attorney. So I've given you a different option that I would be working with you to work through this document, to process all of the results, to do tabulations and summarization. I've also set it up so that it's a total 360 evaluation that would take into consideration all of the direct reports to the city administrator. And that's where we have another problem, is because Tammy Bannock, who is a city recorder, is a direct report, so she would be processing some of her own results. So I've hoped that you've had a chance to review it, and I would welcome any questions that you may have regarding how this would work out. If you happen to approve the process as it's presented, I will hand out the timelines. Other than that,
Questions?
Well, it's not so much as a question as a statement. I have to say this is much better than what we went through before, and we were behind the 8 ball, so I really appreciate the work and what you have done here.
thank you.
Questions?
Well, you just mentioned about, well, one question I had, which I deducted, the direct reports, I'm assuming is department heads?
It would be department heads.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it would be the department heads, the city recorder,
right.
and then Haley Kratz, who is the office assistant.
Mm-hmm. And yourself?
Well, I am the interim. I would say that I don't have a stake in this process, so I can be the objective observer. I don't think that it would be fair, since I am a short-timer, to actually evaluate.
Well, as you mentioned, we have in the past with Peter Boyce had a system like this, and that the city attorney calculated the results, so that there was, like you say, a separation. Last year we hired somebody else to do a 360 that did interviews, and because Mr. Swanson resigned prior to that process being completed, it wasn't done, which I thought that was a good process to go through again, being that it is a person that's, you know, outside the city, somebody that isn't beholden to our city administrator, as well, any of the department heads, or like you say, other people that report directly to Ms. Betts. So my suggestion would be to go that route.
And I know that some jurisdictions have gone that route. Matter of fact, I've been contacted by another one who would be interested in using my services for that. I know that it is more time-consuming,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much more expensive, being that I am already here and you're already paying me. But that is certainly the council's prerogative. The only thing I would remind you is that I went back to Ms. Betts' employment agreement, and it indicates that you would do the evaluation at the end of the year, so that will be October the 11th.
So end of her first year?
Yes.
Okay.
Her first year as city administrator.
Right. So I thought you had asked that this come back before us, like back in June, but last year, so that we wouldn't get.
Right.
'Cause we've always been in the
Behind it.
behind.
Yep.
I, for one, have no question of your objectivity, and I feel like this seems like a very thorough process. So I like what you've laid out here, and I think that this is, with regard to cost, I think this is probably the most cost-effective. And you just did declare you are the interim, so it's not
I am.
it's not the same position as being somebody who's permanently careered into that position. So I'm
And
good
when
with
your
it.
rules were created earlier, my interim position did not exist.
Right.
So
That's true. It didn't.
All
Right.
Councilor Milch?
I will say that as someone who at the time was a citizen representative on that rules committee that worked on that, that wasn't an area that we spent a great deal of time on, and I'm sure I would be willing to be much more flexible in how we administer this, and I appreciate your recommendations. I'm extremely grateful for the time you've put into developing an instrument to do that, because that would certainly be the hard part if we wanted to do it in-house. And the fact that you've put time into that and developed something that is specific to the position we're looking at, I think is very good, and so I would also be supportive of your recommendation.
Thank you.
Councilor Mercero.
Just from my being the senior in the group, I've gone through this one from when Peter Boyce was in there, in the city administrator spot, and they had pretty much the same, but as Councilor Reisner suggested, it was calculated and such, and everything went to the legal staff, and they developed what the actual number was. The only input I've got towards that, the main concern by the council from year to year was if the questions were right. And so every year, just about, we went back and said, okay, how would we like the questions, and redid them.
Yeah.
So, whether that'll happen now, who knows, but that's the way it's worked in the past.
There are many variations of questions, but I've tried to narrow it down to the ones that, at least in my mind, are the most applicable to a city administrator or a city manager, and how that person interacts with the council and the community and the media and the public in general, and then also interacts with his or her staff.
But this is only going out to the department heads, council, city recorder, and Haley. How do we capture the citizens and the other jurisdictions? I think with Mr. Swanson's review, didn't that brought in more than just the direct report? Didn't that brought in citizens and other people as well?
Correct.
I would say, though, we are representing the citizens, and I feel fully confident in the constituents that I represent coming to me and discussing what their views are on not only city administrator, the council, the staff as well. So, in already having those conversations, I feel fully qualified to be able to assess this from a performance rating standpoint, and would reach out to the citizens to get comment as well.
And that's how I was going to respond, is
Okay.
that you are representative of the community and the businesses here, and that you have the expertise to respond to these questions. In my history, the only time that I have had actual community input would be when I was doing a recruitment for a city manager or a city administrator, and then there would be a special meeting set up to allow that to happen, and that information was folded into the process.
Okay.
So may I ask, speaking of, just mentioned something about your history. So how many of these have you put together as to for what other cities that you've done this with?
I have worked on it multiple times for the city of Tualatin, because that's where I retired after 27 years. I worked on it for the city of Newburgh, and then I had discussion with the city of Dundee, and I have worked with other HR professionals in my peer group in helping them do that for their organization, and I would rather not mention the city that recently contacted me to do it.
No, that's...
You only did this for 27 years with the city of Tualatin?
Yes.
Okay, we want to make sure you're
so I mean,
qualified.
not just employee evaluations, but for the city administrator, city manager in those jurisdictions?
For appointed positions. So it has been either the city manager or the city administrator, those that had appointed city attorneys in-house, and for municipal judges.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Mayor, I move the adoption of Resolution 1145, a resolution adopting the process and an evaluation document containing criteria for the evaluation of the city administrator's job performance.
I'd second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Milch, seconded by Councilor Tracy. Any further discussion?
Well, before I still am not comfortable with this, so I can't support it, just to
Okay.
let you know.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passed. Thank you very much. Next is number 9, permanent surface water storm drain and sanitary sewer easement to Water Environmental Services, also called WES, for the 82nd Street project. And we do have correspondence that we received late.
Okay, and I think Chris Story is here, correct?
Yes.
So what you have in your additional correspondence tonight was some answers to some questions that you had. So you should have a copy of the Exhibit A easement area and also the vicinity map in your packet. And I have the permanent surface water and storm drain sanitary sewer easement from WES for the 82nd Street project. This is something that has been in the works for the past couple of years with our former city planner. And what we're trying to do now is to allow WES to have access onto the city property to do the 82nd Street Bridge project. So I will have David talk a little bit about the easement, and then Chris Story is also here to answer questions about the proposed timeline for the project and the bridge closure and access after it's complete as well.
Should we have Chris come up here just in case?
So briefly, the issue I think started with maybe a misunderstanding of whether permits, whether the county would be required to get any permits from us, from the city, as a result of the work they're doing on the bridge. And I guess I can say the former planner for the city, I think, was in contact with WES, and at that point said that it didn't look like there were any permits necessary. When Melissa came on board, there was a discussion that occurred amongst representatives from Oregon City and on their side, where there were some permits that were being sought or being issued. And so that kind of, I think, fostered a little bit of a relook at it. And so at this point, what we've got is really just the easement to basically recognize that there is a bridge that the county owns and maintains that actually is on Gladstone property, and there wasn't, at least historically, any documentation that accompanied that in terms of an easement that would say, yes, you're able to be here. So that's really what this is about. I think Chris may be able to give a lot more sort of explanation about the project itself, timelines, what kind of interruption it's going to be. But tonight really is a matter of getting, essentially having the county with the legal authority to be doing the work on the bridge on our side that it wants to do, and it would be done through this proposed easement.
All right. Any questions? This is kind of housekeeping kind of stuff.
I do have a quick question.
Oh, okay, I thought he was going to talk, but I do too. You
So
go ahead.
what is it? I mean, I'm reading this one thing, and the easement looks like it's the whole bridge. Is that what the easement is? Or is the easement just the amount of land underneath the piers on our side that you are meeting? Did we own that bridge? We weren't billing it up. It's $20,000.
Yes,
That's our bridge.
I feel like I should offer you a bit more history because Wes walks into this conversation saying, you sold us a bridge for $1. And happily it wasn't at least the Brooklyn Bridge. But we actually had an agreement back in the, I think, late 80s, early 90s where the bridge was sold to Wes for $1 for the purpose of holding pipes. And in that document, which I think we discovered as part of this conversation, it conveyed the bridge but not the land under the bridge, or the land that the bridge sat upon, which was, I would think, an oversight. And as that issue bubbled up, we had a planner and an engineer talking to each other, and they just kept missing. So I became involved. I was able to work with Administrator Betts and your city attorneys, and I think, frankly, this is a smooth path forward. The land itself, the city owns a parcel that's running all along the river and where the bridge is across to the Oregon City side. So we're looking for an easement that basically mirrors where the bridge is.
So on that agreement for the dollar, did it stipulate that you would maintain and keep the bridge open at all times, or not at all times, as much as you could then?
Actually, the bridge was conveyed to hold pipes. Having it open for pedestrian and bicycle access is an accommodation that West offers to the community. It's not a requirement, but it's something that's important to us to partner with our jurisdictions that we support and serve. So actually, part of what we've done in our design is to hang the pipes off the side of the bridge. Our engineers have given us what I call the engineer look of this is not the most efficient way of doing things, because the most efficient way would be to lay the pipes right on top of the bridge. But that would impede pedestrian and bicycle access. Okay. In fact, what we've done as part of our design is to actually upgrade it seismically so that it will be able to handle emergency vehicles as well. So that in the event of a disaster, the bridge will not only support pipes, but also emergency vehicles up to fire trucks being able to cross the 82nd Street Bridge.
Any other questions?
Oh yes, I do. So there's an office building on our side of the bridge on the east approach. Where is that on this map that we just got?
Clackamas Plaza.
Yeah, is that the name of it?
It would be beyond the scope of the easement. It's not on the parcel that's being affected.
So it would be somewhere in here then?
Yeah, probably a little bit further.
Further north?
Up. It might even be a bit off the
paper.
page.
Oh, okay.
There's a bit of buffer around that
So
property.
would this be somewhere like where the there's a couple posts or two that at the end of the bridge?
Yeah, what we aligned it is exactly the width of the bridge, with a sort of a few feet on the side where there's shading going just to the edge of the parcel line. So it should, for the most part, track exactly just where the bridge is.
And this is the land underneath as well, correct?
Yeah, we already own the bridge, we just don't own the land it sits on, so that's what we're trying to clear up tonight.
So, well, you mentioned and was asked about continued access for pedestrians and bicycles, and like I say, you mentioned that also. Is there agreement with the city that would be maintained?
There's no contractual agreement. There's certainly a commitment on our part.
Right. Well, I'm just confirming because I was talking with Ms. Ahrens today, and she was under the understanding that there is, and I thought maybe in our
not that I'm aware of.
Because I can't. What's the name of the pipeline that comes down from Lowe's along the freeway?
Intertie 2.
Right. So back about 8 years ago, when that came through, I was the chairman of the Planning Commission, and there was talk of putting that and other pipes across the deck, and which really concerned me and several other members of the community.
Right.
So there isn't any way to stop West from doing that. It's just the fact that you're, for the better of the community, you guys are doing that.
That plus, honestly, if we do this work now, we're probably not going to go back through and rip it back out and stick it on the top of the bridge. We're putting the pipes along the side of the bridge now, and we anticipate that lasting for quite a while. Certainly that's our hope anyway.
We'll have another bridge hopefully pretty soon that you can run
there's
pipes
that
on.
conversation too.
Yep.
And
that's hopeful.
For the record, I also wanted to state that there is an agreement that West will be paying the city $20,000 for the easement, and that we have committed to putting that into the parks budget for maintenance of that.
Right. Thank you. That was my next question. Is how'd you come up with the 20,000?
We basically just looked at the square footage of the easement area and tried to look at what we pay for similar easements throughout the district. We often get right-of-way easements, and that's sort of. So. I have to admit, we rounded a little bit. It was 19,000 something, and we did actually round it up. We took it to a nice even number.
All right. Any more questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to approve that we make a motion for think I'm just going to read what this last thing here is. Permanent surface water, storm drain, and sanitary sewer easement to West Water Environmental Services for the 82nd Street project for $1,200,000.
Let the record
let the record state for $20,000.
I'll second the 20,000.
Motion was made by Council.
Did the microphone reflect the gasp?
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon and seconded by Councilor Reisner. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have your easement.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
This will be on the Board of County Commissioners agenda next week, and you will get the check shortly thereafter. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for putting that in the parks budget. It's awesome. Next item is number 10, Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force, Gladstone Representative Appointment.
Yes, and from here on out, we have lots of good things to talk about the library tonight, and I think that in the information that you have, you see that there's a lot of movement. So I'm going to have Clackamas County staff come up. We have Greg Williams, Laura Zettner, and I believe they're going to introduce our project manager, Donna Robinson. And we'll start to talk about the Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force.
Hello and welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. Thank you so much for having us here. We appreciate it. Before we get into our agenda items, I want to take the opportunity to introduce to you Donna Robinson. She is our new Concord Property and Library Planning Project Manager. And I'm going to go ahead and read the announcement that I actually sent out to the Board of County Commissioners. Donna Robinson is a senior project manager with over 30 years of experience managing projects for public agencies and private clients, including Oregon Department of Transportation, Ports of Vancouver and Portland, Vancouver Energy, the Federal Highway Administration, and numerous local jurisdictions. Donna has managed large transportation projects, including the Newburgh-Dundee Bypass, as well as land use, energy, building, facility projects. She has extensive experience managing multidisciplinary project teams and successfully addressing the needs and expectations of clients as well as the public. Dawn has degrees in architecture and landscape architecture. She's also an artist and pursues painting and photography in her free time, as well as traveling, volunteer work, and spending time with her sons. And she's a resident of Clackamas County and has lived here for 30 years. She started with us on August 20th, and so we're very excited to have her. She's going to be managing the public outreach process, the planning process, the design, and the construction of both the Gladstone Library and the Concord, the Oak Lodge Library. So we're, again, very pleased that she's with us. And would you like to say anything?
I'm excited to be here. It seems like time is just going by fast. I've met a lot of people, and tonight I was at Oak Lodge Friends meeting, and I'll be going to all the Friends and Advisory Board meetings. And if you ever have any questions, just give me a call.
Wonderful. So the first thing we need to do is the appointment. Do you want to just do that first, and then we can move on to the...
Yes, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The library board vetted all 5 applications, and I wanted to be clear that none of the applications are in the city limits, but they are all in this Gladstone service area, and that the board recommended that Gary Burkowski be appointed to the Concord Task Force.
Any discussion?
I'd like to move then, if there isn't, to approve the Gladstone Library's recommendation to appoint Gary Wilkowski to the Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force as our representative.
I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Reisner, seconded by Councilor Neese. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? What else can we get him to volunteer for? That's the follow-up question every time. All right, so on to the next agenda item, which is 11, Amendment number 3 to the Cooperative Intergovernmental Agreement, also called an IGA, between the Library District of Clackamas County and Library Cities.
And yesterday, I got to watch Laura do this presentation to the city managers in Clackamas County. As you're aware, 2/3 of the cities need to approve these amendments. I'm pleased to say that Lake Oswego has already approved it, and we have several of the other cities that have it on their agenda. So we aren't foreseeing there being any issue with that. Laura will talk about it for a moment. I also wanted to recognize David and Natalie because they were on our task force as we worked through these proposed amendments. All right.
Thank you. Actually, and last night, the City of Westland also approved
Good.
the
Cool.
amendment. And we have it on Oregon City, Milwaukee, is it Wilsonville? And there's one more.
This, and Sandy's part of it, that's part of the, they need to approve it?
Already. So we are not anticipating issues.
Boy, Gladstone better do right.
Pressure's on.
Pass it. Then we'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
So I'll be talking about the Library District proposed amendments. So let me start with just a quick overview, and this is a very quick presentation. So why are we needing to amend the Library District Master IGA? And in doing that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the settlement agreement between the City of Gladstone and Clackamas County. What amendments are being proposed? We have two areas. We have Section 1.6, which we have some adjustments to, and then we added a new section, I think it's 2.4. And then what is the process and timeline that we have requested all the city councils to adopt these amendments. So why are the amendments necessary? I just wanted to give a little bit of a background. In 2008, when the district was formed, the county had actually had the intent of getting out of the library retail business. And at that time, we had 3 libraries that were county libraries: the Hoodland Library, Clackamas Corner, and Oak Lodge. Hoodland transferred to the city of Sandy, all the operations, the building and everything, and staff transferred. The county, I believe in 2014, built a brand new library, Sunnyside Library, and that actually transferred to the city of Happy Valley on July 1st of 2015. So all the staff, the building, all the operations went to the city of Happy Valley. And then Oak Lodge, it was the intent, if Gladstone were to have built the library, the single library, to serve both of those areas, it was the intent to close the Oak Lodge Library. And as you're aware, those plans did not come to be, and eventually became the subject of litigation between Clackamas County and the city of Gladstone. So then in October of 2017, and actually that was the last time I was here at this building, was when we talked about the settlement agreement. We came to a settlement agreement, and in that agreement, basically what the county agreed to do was to build 2 buildings, a 6,000 square foot library at the current City Hall site here in the city of Gladstone, and then a 19,500 square foot library in the Oak Lodge area site to be determined. The county has agreed to build, manage, operate, and transfer all the Gladstone staff to the county. Gladstone has agreed to contribute $200,000 as well as the current library distribution to Clackamas County to manage the operations. So in order to do all of this, we need to make a couple of adjustments to the IGA. So in section 1.6, we are amending the agreement to designate Clackamas County as a recipient of the district funds that we currently have set aside in reserve. We have $2.5 million, and basically the way that came about is every year Oak Lodge receives a distribution, and anything that they don't spend per the IGA was required to go into the reserves. So this amendment will just make it so that those dollars, the $2.5 million, can go to the county to build the libraries. So that's the first part of the amendment. We added a section 2.4, which basically just memorialized the intent of the settlement agreement that said Clackamas County would build 2 libraries. manage, operate, and run both of those libraries. And finally, in attachment B, we left the current service boundaries as they exist today. Originally, they were going to be changed, but now they're not going to be changed. So that was left alone. So this is the most important slide for all the other libraries, or all the other cities, but I will just share this with you. There are no changes to the distribution formula at all. It will stay the same. There are no changes to the service area boundaries for any of the cities. There's no impact. Really, only Gladstone and Oak Lodge are impacted by what the amendments that we have. And so the timeline for this is we have requested that all of the city councils adopt the amendments prior to, I think I have that on there, October 31st. And we need 2/3 of the cities to have the amendment be approved, and we are anticipating that we won't have any issue with that at all. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Milch.
Just a clarification question on the service area boundaries. You indicated no change, but had the original proposal gone through where Gladstone would have been the designated library city serving both, would the Gladstone service library district have been the combination of what you're describing as a Gladstone district and an Oak Lodge district now? Have you basically split that in half into two separate ones?
So what would have happened is the Oak Lodge service area, 70% of it approximately would have come to Gladstone, and 30% would have gone to Milwaukee.
Oh, okay, so it would have been a little difference. Okay,
There
all
was
right,
a
that's
little
helpful to
difference.
understand. Thank you.
That's what was intended, and so that was why we had to amend attachment B to just say we're leaving everything as is.
Any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I move that we approve Amendment 3 to the Cooperative Intergovernmental Agreement between the Library District of Clackamas County and the Library Cities.
I will second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Reisner, seconded by Councilor Neese. Any further discussion?
I'd like to thank Natalie for participating, and also, David, but especially Natalie taking, I mean, you've been doing a lot for the library the last couple of years with, well, hopefully in
someday.
Well, I'm looking at maybe 4 years we'll be sitting at the new library after we get the Civic Center done. 2 years, and that's right. So you
Got your marching orders.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Any more discussion?
So thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you very much. Next item is number 12, Gladstone Library Community Planning Task Force Formation Process.
Yes. So again, in your packet, we have a pretty specific charter, and this is a Clackamas County charter. They are the ones forming the Gladstone Community Library Planning Task Force. And I wanted to let you know that if you look at page 12.3 in your packet, under the membership and staff support, it will consist of 13 voting members, and the Gladstone Library Advisory Board will recommend a total of 6 members. So 4 members will be drawn from the Library Advisory Board, and then 2 members shall be drawn from the Gladstone Library Foundation. And down at the bottom, when we pick the 6 at-large members, it's asking for 2 members of the City Council to be part of the selection committee. And so the only action we really need tonight is for you to tell me which 2 of you would like to be part of this selection committee, understanding that it is a Clackamas County selection committee and that they will be initiating the application process, and that we will participate in the evaluation and selection.
Any questions for staff?
No, I don't have any questions.
Oh.
Councilor Milch.
I understand that we had 1 Library Advisory Board member resign recently, so there is 1 vacancy.
Correct.
They're asking that 4 of the 5 members be on the task force, and that the 1 member of the board who is not on the task force be on the committee to help choose the at-large people.
Right.
As I recall, the one person who resigned from the library board is one of the two individuals who was appointed at the time that we were looking for people who specifically lived outside the city limits of Gladstone, but within the library service area. And I don't know if we still, at this point with all these groups, still want to adhere to that particular criteria for selecting the replacement person. But we may want to have one of our more experienced board members be part of that group to select the at-large. And so if we appoint a new library board member, we are also essentially, if you follow my recommendation, we would also essentially be appointing them to the task force as well. And I don't know in what order we have to do this or how soon these groups are going to start meeting.
So it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, that the Library Advisory Board is going to select the 4 members that are on this, not the City Council, correct? And that's why we're trying to recruit for that replacement, is so that person can be, if they desire, to be part of this. And then they will also select the one person that will be on the selection process. So the Library Board will choose internally who wants to be on the selection process and who wants to be on the planning committee.
Okay.
Yes. But I do need 2 of you.
Yes. Who would like to be on this?
I recommend...
It's just a recruitment task. It's the recruitment group.
You review the applications and help make a recommendation.
Okay. Who would like to be on it?
I recommend that Councilor Neese be considered as a council member, since she's been the alternative liaison to the library committee.
Who else? We need one more person.
I'd be glad to
Neil?
participate also.
Would anybody else like to be on it?
Does it meet after January?
I have no idea. That's right, you're going to be gone. All right, so it can't be Councilor McMahon. So is everybody okay with Councilor Neese and Councilor Reisner?
Yes.
Yep. That works? All right, so there you have it.
Great. Do you
That's
want
it on
something
that one?
formal, motion-wise? I mean, or does that suffice for you?
Motion.
Okay, someone want to make a motion to appoint?
Yeah, I'd love to, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we nominate Councilor Reisner and Councilor Neese to whatever this committee was for the library.
The recruitment.
The
application.
Gladstone Community Library Planning Task Force.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon, seconded by Councilor Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. Formal. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right. We need to take a 2-minute break. All right. We're we're reconvening the meeting, City Council meeting. It's 8:17 p.m. All right. We're adding item number 13, which is review and discussion of access to legal bills. David?
Okay. So this is sort of a follow-up from our executive session, and I just wanted it to be clear that what we're going to be talking tonight is what would otherwise be an attorney-client privilege memo. We have copies of that if people want to see that. The council agreed to have this discussion in public, and so agreed to waive the privilege that attaches to it. So this stems from, I think, a discussion that's been taking place for a little while. The council's considered this issue in the past. I think the thing that precipitated this particular memo and the discussion tonight is our office received a letter from an attorney named Johnson Dunn out in the Gorge area, Hood River, representing Councilor Reisner, and bringing up some issues with respect to the council's decision to limit access to our bills. And so what this memo is a response to that letter, and I guess I'll just go through and summarize it. I know you've all had a chance to read it. Members of the public have a copy of it as well. By and large, the letter from Mr. Dunn raised 3 issues. The first was that the council, and through its rules, ultimately can't limit access to, and by extension, it's all manner of information. In this case, it's our bills, to any individual counselor or put any limitations on that. The second issue was that those bills that we send to the city are not exempt public records. That was the second issue that the letter raised. And the third was that because certain non-elected officials of the city view the bills, according to Mr. Dunn, he asserted that that means they can't contain confidential information. So the memo kind of does respond to all three of those issues, and so I'll just take them in order, and if you have questions during this, I'd encourage you to ask them while I'm speaking, or if you want to wait until the end, that's fine too. So with respect to rules that limit the access to our bills, and like I said, this is not just unique to the bills. Your rules don't speak to attorney bills. Your rules speak to, basically they're written in a way that say that the council can essentially limit access if it feels that providing information to counselors on request would create a significant workflow issue for staff. And so that has been the basis for the council's decision to date. And so ultimately we disagree with Mr. Dunn in terms of that the council can't make that decision or write a rule that says that. And I do want to stress, it's not because this is just attorney bills. This is much broader than that. This is really gets down to sort of fundamental issues about home rule authority and how cities operate in Oregon. That sounds dramatic, but it does touch on a much larger issue. The city has a charter, and that's what its governance is based on. Unlike most counties in Oregon and virtually every other local government, cities have a unique position in which they have, and the Constitution of Oregon grants this to them, what's called home rule authority. And basically, particularly when it comes to how your city is run, how you elect public officials, what powers they have, the form of government you use, whether you have 7 members and it's like a commission-based form of government, like the city of Portland is really the only true example of that anymore, where you have individual counselors who are actually administrative heads of different parts of the city. What's most typical these days is what's called counselor-manager forms of government. 7 officials that are elected set policy, and then the day-to-day operations are run by a professional staff. Be that as it may, your charter lays all that out in terms of what, if any, individual authority any of you have. And in Gladstone's case, not unlike most cities, that authority for individual elected officials is extremely limited. Gladstone's charter talks about the mayor presiding over meetings, keeping order, having some committee appointment authority. It talks about the president of the council essentially having the authority to step in place of the mayor when the mayor is absent or is not able to perform his or her duties. With respect to individual elected officials, that's all it talks about. And otherwise, the charter, and again, this is not unlike most local charters, says all other powers are reserved to the council. And so that's the council as a whole, or maybe even better put, a majority of the council, depending on what the wishes are on a particular issue. And your charter also talks about basically nothing happens without a majority vote of the council. So a way to sort of flip this, and I think it comes as a shock to a lot of people, but is that, your rules, and this is true of other jurisdictions that we represent that have council rules, really sort of set the exceptions, or put in place and sort of flesh out what you're going to allow individual counselors, individual elected officials to do, given the fact that charters would otherwise, if you didn't have those rules, you'd be looking at everything having to be basically a vote of the council, a majority vote of the council. It just doesn't make for good functioning government, at least in modern times. So your rules have a variety of things that allow, how your meetings are going to be conducted, how you're going to interact with staff is a section. And so as part of that, you have a rule that, as I described, talks about if there's a belief that a request for information from an individual counselor could lead to a disruption in workflow, the council can say we want to limit access to that, and essentially that's what you've done. So again, on that issue, for those reasons, we disagree with Mr. Dunn. The public records issue, basically this, I think it's maybe easiest to start with what was stated in the letter, and that was that bills and invoices for legal services are clearly not exempt from disclosure under the public records law. And so, again, we disagree with that to an extent. We go through and talk about why we think, well, I'll for the sake of discussion, kind of lay out some of that. So, generally speaking, in Oregon, yes, everything that kind of comes into your, wheelhouse, documents, other things, voicemails, are an example of another thing that you save, is a public record, and the presumption is that it's subject to disclosure. But the law also has a host of 60-plus, 70-plus exemptions. That some of them are conditional exemptions. So basically, if the public interest outweighs the need, if you will, or at least the offered need, the basis for why a jurisdiction would say we're going to keep this exempt, then it's disclosable. But there's also a list of things that are categorically exempt. And one of those is records or information, the disclosure of which is prohibited or restricted or otherwise made confidential or privileged under Oregon law. So that gets to a lot of different types of information, but for our purposes today, we're just going to focus on the fact that that covers the attorney-client privilege. Okay. So then the question becomes, well, what does that entail? Because if it's covered by the privilege, then it's an exempt public record unconditionally. It just is not subject to disclosure. So we talk a little bit about that, and there have been cases that have admittedly said not everything that we write to you, not everything that we put down in writing is a confidential communication. One example of that would be when we're talking about things that really aren't the provision of legal advice. Okay, so I can make a meeting on September 4th. I can, mundane things that don't involve the transmission or the work that is involved in giving you legal advice. Those things are not covered by the privilege. With respect to the bills, there's elements of the bills that aren't covered by the privilege. The time we spent on something, the amount, our rate, our total amount that we, billed the city for that work. The description of the matter, so we break up, as we do for all our clients, our matters into about 12 different sections. Land use and community development, finance, real estate transactions, litigation and risk management. And when we have our monthly bills, we put what we're doing into those buckets. And so those buckets would not be, they would be subject to disclosure. We do that. That's what staff does every month with the legal bill that you approve tonight, and I think every month you look at it, costs on projects. It talks about what the matters are. It talks about the amount for each of those matters, and you get a chance to look at that and approve it. And I don't think it currently talks about time, but that would just be a matter of adding that if you wanted to see that. So our conclusion on the public records issue, and I'll just read basically a case here that sort of alludes to this, is that the things that I just talked about, not covered by the privilege, but, and this is a quote, correspondence, bills, ledgers, statements, and time records which also reveal the motive of the client in seeking representation, litigation strategy, or the specific nature of the services provided, such as researching particular areas of law, fall within the privilege. And so one of the things that we've done historically, and I know this was a few years ago, but I assume that the spirit is still true, and it's, again, something that most of our clients ask for. But Gladstone had this discussion specifically years ago, was detail in our bills. There was a point in time where, and this predates my my work for my work at all as a lawyer, but where lawyers would literally just send a bill for services rendered X amount of money. Naturally people sort of balked at that, and you're paying a significant amount of money for these services. We want to see what you're doing. So our bills tend to be fairly detailed. There will be times where they may not provide as much detail as we would otherwise provide, for instance, in an employment personnel matter, and that's mostly because the subjects of those issues have independent rights in terms of their privacy. So we tend to be more general in that regard. But overall, we try to provide a decent amount of detail to clients so they know, yeah, we got this inquiry, here's what the issue was, here's what we did in response to it, and this is the time and the amount that we're billing for it. So based on that, there are aspects of our bill that we feel are clearly subject to the privilege and therefore would be exempt public records. And we don't think it's a correct statement to say unconditionally that bills and invoices for legal services are clearly not exempt from disclosure. We think, in our case, the majority of them clearly would be. So that's that issue. Any questions on that? Okay. So then the final issue comes down to, or at least the one that was raised in the letter, was the fact that we send our bills. We send it to Jackie as the city administrator. Jackie likely, actually I don't know your specific protocol, but most of our clients, and I'm assuming Jackie does something similar, depending on what the issue is, if it's public works, may put the bill in front of Jim. Why not? Because he's probably the person that was most intimately involved in some of the questions, some of the issues that were raised. If it were finance, maybe Kathy would look at it, etc. And so Mr. Dunn's letter indicated that by virtue of the fact that employees, essentially in this case, people other than all of you, are viewing those bills, then that we are disclosing, inappropriately disclosing confidential information. And I think it's really important to look at what Oregon law says about what a client is, and then how it talks about representatives of the client. And important to note that representatives of the client are covered by the privilege, just as the client is as well. So I've said before in meetings, and again I think this is one thing that people conceptually maybe just sort of not struggle with, just sort of scratch their heads a little bit, but my client is not any of you. It's not the council per se. It's certainly not an individual councilor or the mayor. It's not Jackie. It's the legal corporation, municipal corporation, the city of Gladstone. That is the client, and the law defines the client as a person, so it could be an individual. Lawyers represent individuals all the time. That's not what we do. A public officer, that would be like the Secretary of State, the governor, where they hold they serve as a distinct office. A corporation, association, or other organization or entity, either public or private. So again, you're a public municipal corporation, or the city is a public municipal corporation, and therefore the city, as that entity, is our client. But as I mentioned, there are, especially with respect to organizations, and this applies to businesses, private businesses, corporations, partnerships, etc. There are individuals that can act and have to act on behalf of those organizations. The City of Gladstone as a legal entity doesn't do anything on its own. It needs human beings, elected officials and staff to operate. And so the law looks at those folks as being covered by the privilege as well, and talks about them as representatives of the client, and defines them as a principal, an officer, or director of the client, or a person who has authority to obtain professional legal services, or to act on legal advice rendered on behalf of the client, or a person for the purpose of effectuating legal representation for the client makes or receives a confidential communication while acting in the person's scope of employment for the client. It's a lot of words there, I realize. Basically, each council member is an elected official, and officials are a representative of the client. So each of you is a representative of the client. The city administrator, and we would say other department heads who have authority to obtain legal advice, those two are representatives of the client. And a person who, as I talked about that last big, jumble of words, who facilitates and effectuates legal representation. So people that would be looking at our invoices, people that would be, maybe copied on an email that we're sending, let's say, to Jim, one of his subordinates, because the subordinate is the one that's in the field working on a particular issue with a contractor they're having problems with. Those folks make or receive confidential communications from our office, and this is critical, while acting in the scope of their employment for the city. So, it's not when they're out as a private citizen doing, the business they do in their free time, but as they operate as an employee of the city. So, our opinion is that all of those combined are covered by the attorney-client privilege. So when we send a bill to Jackie, she's a representative of the client. The fact that she's not the elected officials is irrelevant from our point of view in terms of whether the privilege applies. And so, again, on that point, we don't believe that we're disclosing any confidential matters by virtue of the fact that Jackie or Jim or Kathy or another staff member may ultimately view those billing entries. So, that's sort of a summary of it. I think it's important. I want to say this because I've said it before, and I'll say it again tonight. This is really an issue in terms of access to our bills or access to other information, frankly, but obviously, our bills is more personal to us, that we don't have a problem with in terms of having counselors have access to it. That is not an issue for us. Councilor Reisner had access to our bills for a stretch of time. And what our concern is basically that there be a process for it, that there's be a recognition that there's still attorney-client privilege communications, or at least the bulk of what's in there is, and that there's a recognition that whomever receives them as a representative of the client isn't his or her individually, his or her own self able to go ahead and disclose that information. The only way that like we did tonight, that the privilege can be waived is ultimately when a majority of you decide that that's appropriate. And with that, I can take any questions.
Well, I have one quick statement. So before rumors get started that I'm unethical or underhanded, I wanted to let everybody know that I was CC'd directly from the attorney when it was sent to David. As mayor, and actually that happens quite often, I'm CC'd as mayor on things. David was on vacation. I received it. I asked Jackie if she also had been CC'd. She said no, we did not go into details. And I opted to wait until David returned from vacation to do anything, and at his direction, he chose to handle it the way he's doing tonight. So that was full disclosure. That's how that was handled. That's why my name's on it.
So, David, if we were to establish a policy that any member of the council who wanted to could review the appropriately redacted detailed invoices similar to the one that we reviewed earlier tonight. Maybe look at them in a 3-ring binder in an office but not remove them from the facility. By allowing a representative of the client that we would be individually to review them in that way, you're saying that would not in any way waive our right to consider them still confidential, that they wouldn't suddenly be open to someone who wanted to make a public records request, a citizen who wanted to see them. We could maintain that confidentiality and still allow someone to view them under appropriate rules, as you say, the understanding that they would not waive the privilege themselves by revealing the contents to anyone else.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Having a process whereby, if you did it as you described it, Councilor Milch, counselors that would come and review that would not be, by virtue of that review, waiving anything. The privilege would still apply. The only, I guess to reemphasize, the only way to waive the privilege would be that a majority of you decide to do that.
Okay.
Now, I will say that if that's why it's important, and I'm stressing that it's, in our view, important to stress for individuals that are privy to confidential privileged communications to not individually go ahead and release that information, is because, number one, you know, it's the you really can't unring the bell. I mean, there may be very, you know, I'll be honest with you. There's a principle here at play, and I'd be overstating it if I said that, you know, every single thing in our bill is extraordinarily sensitive information. It's not so much that, it's the principle of the fact that I don't get a choice in revealing that, and I believe that the way that government works is that neither, and this is the law, that neither should any individual representative of a client get to determine that. The client gets to make that decision. In your case, the only way the client really acts is via the council and via a majority vote of the council. So it's much more of a principle over substance issue here. But yes, as you describe it, that wouldn't, just as if, why I think it's important to talk about this issue of client representatives, because if it were the case that by sending the bill to Jackie, we were disclosing a client confidence, that would be really problematic. And there would have to be an entirely different way. It probably would get back to, you know, for services rendered, you know, and none of you would want that. I mean, nor would we. So yes, as you describe it, a process like that wouldn't affect, and if someone wanted to make a public records request, they're absolutely entitled to do that. And what we would end up doing in that case is going through and redacting everything that we felt was subject to the privilege.
Any more questions?
I've got a bit of history in that this issue has been brought up a minimum of 3 times before. One by our city administrator at that time, Eric Swanson, who was concerned with the question and thought that it may bring the city to a risk. And he asked the council to vote on it, of which they did, and they voted against allowing this to happen. And the same person asked, Councilor Reisner asked for this permission a minimum of 3 times before. And Eric Swanson asked the council, they voted against. It was also requested by the council at least 2 other times, I think 3, that the question to allow Councilor Reisner to get the information was not accepted by the council, like I say, 2 or 3 times before. I would just like to note 4 items that I read in your letter, Mr. Duggan. The council must act as a body, which I think they did at least 3 times before. Your comment, therefore we disagree with the unconditional statement that bills and invoices for legal services are clearly not exempt from disclosure under the Oregon Public Records Law. That raises a question in my mind. Oregon law states that every client has a privilege to refuse to disclose and prevent any other person from disclosing confidential information, confidential communications made for the purpose of facilitating the rendition of professional legal services to the client. And the fourth, and most important to me, and why I voted against this in the past, our only request, as we ask of everyone, of the clients, is for representatives of the city who do view our bills to keep them information confidential unless a majority of the council has waived the privilege for a particular matter or issue. And that's my biggest concern, that really happens. And from experience, I've seen that happen in the past. So. End of speech.
Any additional comments? Councilor McMahon?
Certainly. I guess I'm just mostly disappointed in that we had a meeting 4 days after you mailed this, and I thought we had come to an agreement, and then all of a sudden this comes out. So essentially we wasted our time at that meeting to come to at least a partial agreement. So be it. What I would like to do, and especially looking at the bills, there's nothing in the bills. I'm all right letting you look at them. Back maybe 1 year, 18 months. Though we tried to come to an agreement and a midpoint last time at the last meeting that we had, the council work session, you obviously had no intention at that time to come to any sort of work through with us. I'd ask you again, a work through would be to allow you from now on to look at the redacted or look at what we saw today. I'm fine with that. And to go back no more than 18 months.
In response to what you were saying that I didn't meet, I disagree with that. Knowing that my attorney had sent the city attorney this letter, and not knowing that he was on vacation, I had anticipated that that information or that letter would have been sent to the city. And so I agreed to meet this evening, in the executive session, to go over the bill, knowing that there was this letter in the works that we would be looking at, and Attorney Doofman's reply tonight. So I was anticipating us having this discussion tonight, and was also looking forward to the fact that several of you had never seen an attorney bill, and so you didn't know what we in essence had been talking about over the last several years. And so now everybody has seen what a typical attorney bill looks like, and appreciate
I have, and
your
there's
comments.
nothing in there that
Exactly.
that has necessitated all this work. So
Right.
be it.
Well, that
so be it.
Okay.
I'm perfectly okay to allow you from now on to once a month take a look at the bills. I'd also be fine with a 16th or 18th month look back. I don't think you need to look all the way back to 2016. It's a midpoint. It's a workaround. And I would also ask you to please never share those with anybody, in particular Steve Johnson, which you have done in the past. You gave bills to him, and I just want to make sure that that's something, and that's part of my grief, is that you did that, and I would ask you not to do it again, and that's why I'm saying you can look at them from now on and go back to the 16 or 18 months.
Okay. Well, one, I did apologize publicly for that. I'd like to ask Mr. Mercereau, since he's been here longer, as he said earlier, than all of us, when we've had training from our city staff, including, can you remember when the attorney said, hey, look, our bills are confidential and not to be shared with anybody?
I did not have that conversation with Eric Swanson when he requested from the council.
No, I didn't ask that. I asked, so over the last, 8 years that you've been on city council from when you were appointed, was there any training where the attorney said, hey, look, our bills are confidential and secret? Because I thought that they were always like any other bill, like from PGE, from all the, any other vendor, Wilsonville Lock and Key.
I have not received any training, and I don't believe the council has received any training. I just have a basic understanding about the concerns with legal information.
Well, I agree with that, in that we do get emails or even memos saying, hey, this is confidential, don't share it. We never did, and from the first month that I was sworn in, January 2013, I started looking at and getting copies of bills. No one ever told me that they were confidential. And I'll be glad to, if there's no objection, meet you with what's your proposal. If it's conducive with the rest of the council, go back like 18 months and look through. If I have, as I mentioned, or not me, my attorney suggested, if I have questions, I'll go to Ms. Betts. If it's something that I don't feel is appropriate for that, I'd go to our city attorney before anybody else.
So also I want to just interject that in your city council rules under section H, confidentiality, there are 3 sections in there that I think that if we're headed into this direction that we all just need to know. It says council members will keep all written materials provided to them on matters of confidentiality under law in complete confidence to ensure the city's position is not compromised. No mention of the information read or heard should be made to anyone other than other council members, the city administrator, city attorney, or others as approved by city council. If the council meets in executive session, members should attempt to provide direction or consensus to staff on proposed terms and conditions for negotiations. All contact with other parties must be left to the designated staff or representative handling the negotiations or litigation. Council members may not have any contact or discussion with any other party or its representative, nor communicate any executive session discussion. All public statements, information, or press releases related to a confidential matter will be handled by designated staff or a designated council member, and if any of those are breached, then the council has a process for censorship that it can follow with elected officials and confidential information.
I have one question. Can we clarify again why we're doing this in open session as opposed to in executive session?
Yeah,
Councilor Dumas?
sure, absolutely. So one of the issues that comes up for me as a lawyer is communications with a client, communications with an individual who is represented by an attorney. And so because Mr. Reisner had retained Mr. Dunn for this issue, I couldn't communicate directly with him, with Mr. Reisner. I needed to get Mr. Dunn's approval to do that, which he gave to me today. The second issue is that if we were to have considered this in executive session, then Mr. Reisner could not have been a part of that conversation by virtue of the fact that he's taken a position that's what we would call an adverse party because his position isn't aligned with what the council's decision is, or was at least. And as I mentioned before, one of the bases to have an executive session is to consider an exempt public record, which the memo is. But if you have that executive session with somebody who's adverse to its contents, you no longer have the basis for an executive session. You've effectively waived the privilege. So tonight we discussed that in terms of how do you want to proceed with that, and the council concluded that, and I agree with it, that was my recommendation to you, to have this in open session, so Mr. Reisner would be privy to that conversation.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do we need to make a motion then?
I have a quick question. Are we going to have a process here? I think Councilor Milch suggested something as a process, and I'm not sure if it was received and agreed to by Councilor Reisner for examination of the record. Was this something we were going to talk about, or just open the door? I'm not really sure where we are in that part of the conversation.
So, each month I send my time card to the mayor and the council president. They review it, sign it, and give it back. It could be that each month when the bill comes in and I've reviewed it, I can let you know that it's available to come into my office and look at it. If that's something that you guys want for a process, the 3-ring binder is fine. We can do that. But yes, I would say if you're going to make a motion, you need to be clear on what that not just for Councilor Reisner, but for any of
Agreed.
you that want to have access to that.
One of my suggestions would be to archive 3-ring binder, archive that material in a 3-ring binder, have it in an archival library, and have it accessible to the councilors. And we could go ahead and sign it in, sign it out, just like you're signing any kind of an archive out for anyone who's dealing with sensitive material.
Yes, and we can do that in our vault.
Okay.
That sound fair?
Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay, well then, can someone make a motion along those lines?
I move that henceforth detailed copies of the legal bills be kept in a 3-ring binder and available for examination by any and all council members. Not to be, well, I'm not going to go too much detail on it, with the understanding that they continue to be privileged documents and they are not to be shared outside by the person viewing them.
And to go back, how many months?
And the documents going back to,
18 months.
let me insert a little comment here. I think part of this was a punitive action directed at you personally, Mr. Reisner, in May of 2016. If we say May of 2017, give it a 1-year sentence that is now over. So beginning with bills received by the city after May of 2017. Is that agreeable?
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Milch and seconded by Councilor Neese. Any further discussion?
Yes, so we still have the opportunity to censure a counselor at any point, is that correct? Or to no longer allow them to look at bills? Is
Yes,
that still
I
an
mean,
option for
you're as long as your rules are written the way that they currently are, you would be able to at some point, especially a future council, because this is, as is a given, you're not going to be on the council come, right? You're not running.
That is a given.
Okay, so if another point in time, another council could make a different decision about this. But yes, it's understood, at least going forward as of now, this would be what the decision is.
All right.
And that we could censure
Censures,
bills.
you haven't changed your rules on censure. It's
Okay,
still there.
thank you.
All right, any further discussion?
No, it's not going to touch.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
You're opposed. All right, so one person opposed. Passed. All right,
Thank you.
now we're on to business carried forward. Do we have anything?
I have one item that I'd like to get direction from council on, and that's in regards to public records requests. We have been getting quite a few lately, and our city recorder's been doing an excellent job of processing them in a timely manner. My question really is more relative to, does the council want to know what public records requests we are receiving, or are we giving you too much information? What we've kind of established is that if we receive a public records request that may affect an elected official, then we as a courtesy want to let you know that, but not necessarily the whole council doesn't need to know that. So if you're fine with that, that's what we'll continue to do. The one that I'm generating now wants communications that I've had with the entire council, so that could be with the whole council. The one that was requested on my employment agreement, I shared with the city council so that you were all aware that that was being asked for on myself. So we just want to make sure that we're balancing the information, we just like some feedback. Do you want to know all of the public records requests that we are getting right now? We're happy to do that, or what's your pleasure?
I'd like to know them all right now, just because it seems to be so across the board sometimes and I would say especially for council members, I'd like to know when somebody is requesting information on Councilor Neese or on Councilor Reisner. That's good information for me to know as well, I think, and because it tells us who is requesting it so that we can have a little bit more information on it. So that would be my preference.
I'd agree. I think it's a public courtesy to us, and I think that in a time where we have so many folks requesting information, it gives us the ability to also be very cautious about contact. And
I know none of you will email me again. I
I
know
would
that.
urge. No, I think I'm speaking outside of that. I would urge that all of us understand. I mean, I saw the public records request today. And it's not hard to understand why that request is there, but I think that we all need to be, we have to be careful too, because if there's a public records request going to you, and when we have some contact with folks that are requesting records for whatever reason, we need to be aware of it. I mean, I'm thinking of you, Mayor, you're in the business where you're in land development and planning, right? I mean, you want to know about these things if somebody's requesting records, do you not?
Oh, absolutely.
So that we know that we can make sure our contacts are prudent and that our business outside of this council is prudent.
Right.
So.
And we absolutely agree that people have the right to access that information. For us, it's just determining,
Absolutely.
do you want to know that as well? So it sounds like, at least maybe through the end of the year, that we'll just let you know about all the public records requests that are coming to the city.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else business carried forward? Business from the council. How about if we start with Councilor Mercero?
I would like to announce I've made out the checks, and Dr. Bob is gone now, but made a check out to the Gladstone Center for Children and Families. I can't remember the exact amount, because it was half of $5,900 something, and we also made one out the same amount to the Rotary Club of Gladstone and Oak Grove. So, successful show this year, and we're able to give out 100% to people in need.
Thank you. Councilor McMahon?
Senior Center, this 13th, which is Thursday, is the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. So if you know anybody that's having a 50th this year, anytime this year, it doesn't have to be already passed. They are having the Thursday celebration there. Staff and any and all councilors and the mayor are invited as well. And then just to follow up with what Dr. Bob said on the Gladstone Seniors Foundation, they did just purchase and just had installed an HVAC unit for the senior center. So that was, I think, a $10,000 or $12,000 bill that the city did not have to pay, that the foundation paid. And then just, I think, kudos also to, once again, a lot of the staff there, Jim, Wynot, and Colin, for instead of going out and getting a new roof done right now, and then next year putting an HVAC up there and cutting holes and whatever else that entails, they figured this out of let's put a new HVAC up there first. Next year they're going to start looking at roofing and some other things, so I'm very impressed with how the order is progressing on a lot of those things. It speaks volumes for the people that we have hired.
Councilor Reisner?
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Tracy?
Yeah, I want to make a comment about an article in the Clackamas Review last week. So this is published September 5th, 2018. Recalled city councilor sued against petitioner fails. Citizen Osborne was interviewed in this particular article, and I took exception to one of the lines here, so I'm going to go ahead and read this. Osborne said the lawsuit was an attempt by the city council majority to intimidate citizens and prevent another recall effort. Two things. One is, I've been sitting on the city council over a year now, and I'm going to tell you I don't see a majority up here. I see some folks who will vote together. That's fine. I see political discourse, very happy to see such, And I also see folks who are independently minded. So I'm going to dispel that rumor that there's a majority sitting on the council. Second thing I'm going to dispel is that speaking for myself, my first knowledge of this lawsuit against the chief petitioners came well after the papers were served. And so I take exception to being accused, if I'm part of this majority, of having any knowledge of the lawsuit toward the two chief petitioners, A, and B, that we need to continue doing this divisiveness in the city. I take exception to that as well. This is a red herring. This is part of a political ploy, coup, if you like. I don't care what you call it. But I did not have any idea that the former councilor was filing a lawsuit. So I think this is a very unfair judgment of the council as it sits today, and I'm just going to go ahead and let it go at that. But, you know, frankly, it's just not helping our community to print things like this in the paper, and that's where I'll lay it.
All right, thank you, Councilor Neese.
I attended Clackamas County Economic Development Partnership meeting on August the 30th, and there was a presentation given by Portland General Electric about the future of electricity and where we're headed. And then I also, I am on the steering committee for the Homeless Solutions Coalition, and we will be meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I will be at that meeting.
Councilor Milch?
Back on August 19th, I had the privilege of representing the mayor at the Sunday morning event that sometimes goes by the name of Servant Sunday, or the church has left the building. It's the day when about 6 or 8 churches in this community bring volunteers together and have a short worship service on the campus of the high school, actually in the parking lot of the high school, before going out and doing a lot of good works, beautifying some of the school locations, and also some other lower income communities that need some volunteer service. It's another great example of how the citizens work together to make this a better place, and it was a privilege to be a part of it. And the mayor had a conflict that day, so I hope I was represented her ably.
Thank you very, very much. It's a great group of people.
Let's see, there were a couple other things I was going to talk about. I share that sentence that Councilor Tracy read popped out at me too when I read that article, and I'm glad he's clarified we had nothing to do with the lawsuit. I want to say, with all respect to Angela Riley, I think there's a lot of mythology associated with the so-called Make a Stronger Gladstone group. As I recall from talking to some of these folks, some of those candidates had never met each other before the first night. There was sort of a campaign event. I think we've overstated the again here, you know, kind of a myth of a block of people. But I do share the concern about some of the articles that were written in the Clackamas Review back in the spring. It seemed to be a series of them. And I noticed, I read some of the online comments, and I saw a comment that somebody wrote who went by the screen name of Algorithms. I don't know who it is. This person identified himself or herself as somebody from outside the community. But I thought it was one of the wisest things I read, and I want to share it with you tonight. From the outside looking in, the people of Gladstone don't deserve to have the business of their city government overtaken by the personal enmity exhibited in these tit-for-tat letters to the editor. The city is facing too many real challenges for its residents and taxpayers. The persistently personal interchanges distract from the real business of the city. This person goes on to mention a particular city official who they said was recalled because of his display of personal enmity against anyone who didn't agree with him. That, you know, you may or may not agree with that statement. But it said that's the message the citizens of Gladstone sent. They don't want their city government hamstrung by the politics of personal destruction. City leaders should take the hint, agree to work together, and roll up their sleeves to start working on things of real value to the good people of Gladstone. We have a number of candidates running for office this fall, and I hope that you will choose candidates who agree to work together and roll up their sleeves to start working on the things of real value to the good people of Gladstone. That's what I have.
Thank you. My turn. Food pantry. So I've started volunteering at the food pantry. It was going to be once a month, but now it's twice a week. So that I'm putting it out there. We need more volunteers. Monday mornings, the Oregon Food Bank delivers a truckload of stuff, 7:30 a.m. We don't have the National Honor Society kids helping yet, so if anybody's available, please help. That would be great. We're open Thursdays from 3:30 to 5:30 and Saturdays from 10 to noon. The number of families that are coming is growing. We don't just service Gladstone. Actually, the majority is out of Gladstone. But my experience is these people just don't come for food. They come for the connection. So it's very, very uplifting to meet these people, hear their stories, and be able to help them out a little bit. So we need money. We need volunteers. We're working on both, but please get the word out for the volunteers. I think that was public, or the parks.
Yeah, you wanted me to mention, that was the
Yeah.
thing I had forgotten as I got off track a little bit.
Michael.
Mayor Stemple and I serve as the council liaisons to our Parks Board. This year, we've implemented something new, having different of our advisory committees develop a work plan that sort of coincides with the strategic plan for the city. Our Parks Board has done an excellent job of doing that. We had a joint meeting with them earlier in the year. They developed a plan. They've made progress on a substantial number of the goals that they set forth, and things like the new pickleball courts. They refurbished the tennis courts with a lot of volunteer help. You've heard about this a couple of times. We're seeing a lot more involvement there. They're taking action, doing a lot of research with other park districts in the area about how they handle fees for use of the parks for specific activities, and making it possible for people to make reservations in the use of park facilities. And they're looking at a project for installation of a new outdoor fitness facility in our parks, and you'll be hearing more about that in the future. But I'm really glad to be a part of the group that oversees their work, and they have good leadership, good involvement, great people, and I think parks are one of our great amenities, and I'm glad that they're doing the work they are.
Do we want to mention the Duncan property at all, or hold off on that?
An email went out to the council about 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a piece of property that may be up for sale that the city could purchase that would be adjacent to a park-ish, I think. I don't know if you consider that a park.
It is. It's
Yeah,
identified.
I mean, I know it's on our list, but there's really not much you can do with it. Okay, yeah, Parks Department, Parks and Rec is great.
And they got $20,000 more dollars
Yeah,
to work
so
with.
I have one more quick thing. Halloween is coming up, obviously October 31st. We're closing down more of Portland Avenue. We're closing down Portland Avenue to Clarendon, and we're closing down Dartmouth to Clarendon, and then Dartmouth to the driveway here for the fire and police department to make it a little bit safer. I've got a street plan if anybody wants to participate. We've got lots of room for booths. And Angela, thank you so much for the cider last year. It was wonderful, so now people expect it. So honestly, that's what I've been asked about most. And luckily, the chaplain for our police and fire, Kevin Smith, has his own cider press, and he does it every year, so he's graciously agreed to do that for us this year. We've got popcorn, we've got hopefully cotton candy, we've got some businesses that are interested, so if you guys know of anybody that wants to put up a booth and hand out candy. And we're also talking to churches about trunk or treat, where you back up your car, decorate your trunk, and hand out candy. So we'll have hopefully places to do that too. So I would love everybody to come.
Is this the last bike night? Is that, I don't know.
Thursday night, yes.
Okay.
Thursday night, and that's here on Portland Avenue.
Right, it's just, yeah, here I'm, Dartmouth to Clarendon.
Okay.
This weekend.
Well, that's all that I have. Someone want to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Milch, seconded in tandem by Councilor Tracy and Councilor Reisner. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned at 9:13 p.m.